Hi, I'm Alex.
And I'm Eddie.
Welcome to the 8th episode of Catch 52, a politics podcast brought to you by nobody anymore.
Yeah, well, we are now 44 weeks away from Inauguration 2021, and a lot has changed in the last week that will completely alter the state of the election.
Where we live has changed. How we're recording has changed. How we're even looking at each other has changed.
Yes.
But the only thing that hasn't changed is how good we are at producing these episodes. We're still terrible.
We are no longer at the Duquesne studio in the basement of College Hall. We are now at our respective homes, in our respective bedrooms, on our respective FaceTimes, and recording into our respective voice memos.
Yep. With that said, there has been let's get to the most important thing first.
Yes.
There has been a dropout.
Tulsi Gabbard. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, that's it. Finally, the media can stop saying that it's almost a two-man race and start saying that it isn't a two-man race.
But really,
and as soon as that they're starting to say that it's a two-man race, it's really just a one Biden race.
Yeah, it's a one Joe race.
So there were some primaries that still happened in between our now and our last episode. I believe that was Illinois, Florida,
and
Arizona. No,
yes. Ohio.
That was canceled under questionable circumstances, but we'll deal with that later. Biden wins all three.
Yeah, Biden. That's basically been the news as of late. Biden's winning everything. Bernie's odds of winning are basically zero right now. And there's really nothing else to talk about in the Democratic primary. It's basically a wrap for Joe Biden.
So, why does Bernie stay in? What's the deal?
Yeah, so Bernie has not dropped out yet and has actually stated formally that he is not dropping out. So why is that?
Well, I see two reasons for this. Number one, we're going to have a lot of the same. We're going to have sort of Bernie moving people, and by people I mean Biden. Bernie's moving Biden to the left, for better or worse. Mm-hmm. That's what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And he can also provide a protest vote for anybody who is unsatisfied with the Biden quo and is wanting to make their voice heard, which is, I think that's fine.
Yeah. I think another reason you could see him try to stay in is do kind of what Warren did in the days before she dropped out, where she starts saying, well, you know what, this candidate is a good person. You know, he would be a good candidate, and just trying to win over some of those Bernie bros who otherwise might just vote a third party.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. If Bernie drops out right away and says all hope is lost, I think you see a good amount of the diehard Bernie bros just either sitting out the election or voting for a third party.
Yeah.
And that's not something from a partisan perspective that the Democrats want.
No, but easily the main reason that Bernie is still in the race is to push Biden left on policy. He already has on college. Biden's plan was essentially just a fixed rate debt forgiveness plan, but he took up the Hillary plan from 2016, if anyone remembers that, that Bernie kind of pushed him to do, which is free community college and trade school for 2 years.
Yeah, which is exactly what, at least in my opinion, that's exactly what needs to happen.
Absolutely, I agree, yeah.
And then you also have, I don't know if he's pushing Biden left on immigration. Biden's, it's hard to say.
Yeah, there's a few policies. There are actually not that many policies that they disagree on, but as we've said before and we'll say again, the major disagreement right now in this election is healthcare among the Democrats.
Absolutely. It's something that I think has come up a lot, not now, but in the past, and it was like, how can you be a candidate that is quote unquote left enough for Bernie? I think a lot of people thought that Warren might have been that candidate, but yeah. I mean, Warren's been vilified and kind of destroyed on the internet by a lot of Bernie's online supporters.
Yeah.
So it's clear that she's not left enough for them. I'm starting to wonder if it's a question of, are you politically, like policy wise, are you quote unquote progressive enough,
or are you just not Bernie Sanders?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's weird because of like Bernie is not exactly Bernie is probably the most progressive candidate, but there are a few glaring issues that he has, like most notably gun control. he's pretty weak on the gun issue, which
Well, when
is
he first
totally
got
his
into
right.
Congress, that's really the only issue that he's not been 100% consistent on. Initially, he did have an A rating with the NRA while he was in the
Yep.
House. Obviously, he's changed and admitted that he's grown since then, and you can't really fault him for that in the same way you can't fault any politician for changing their opinion on something. But that he still is not as he's no beta when it comes to gun control.
That's true. But funny enough, apparently Joe Biden is bringing in Beto to do his gun control policy.
Yes, Beto will be Joe Biden's gun control policy specialist, which is definitely not what he needs to do to get the moderate vote, considering how that policy arguably could have lost Beto the Texas senatorial race back in 2018.
Yeah. Definitely. It's kind of like how Obama had like a Ebola czar. It's like Biden is nominating these like random people who he thinks the base is going to like and saying, you do this, you do that, you get a policy, you get a policy.
It seems more of just a strategy to try to rally the Democratic Party behind him versus like actual policy stepping up. The odds that, Beta will be his official advisor on gun control policy is very unlikely at all.
But if it works, it works.
Yes.
It certainly hasn't satisfied a certain subsection of Bernie Sanders supporters. Mm-hmm. But honestly, as this race has gone on, I'm starting to wonder whether or not it's even worth it trying to have like a concerted movement to satisfy those kind of Sanders supporters, or if we just have to let those on the inside that are concerned enough with reality try and convince their fellow Sanders supporters that they need to stick to voting for the party.
Yeah. I think any support of any Sanders vote or any shift of Sanders support is not going to come from outside of the Sanders support base. It's going to come almost exclusively from Bernie itself and the major people in that. So you're going to need to see AOC and Rashida Tlaib and the rest of the squad start talking about Joe Biden pretty soon and how he's not the worst candidate. And that seems kind of far-fetched right now.
Joe Biden is a healer. Okay. Whether that's true or not, the Democrats need to start coming together and saying that. Honestly, if that's why Bernie is in a long-term pragmatic view, if Bernie is staying in the race basically to solidify his brand and then use that, quote unquote brand loyalty of his supporters to channel that into them supporting Biden in the general through clenched teeth, I would respect that.
Yeah.
There's a New York Magazine article that came out this Sunday, though, that says otherwise.
Yeah, and as we were saying earlier, he is still in this race mostly just to push him left, especially on healthcare. And he's taken a particularly strong stance on healthcare recently, especially with everything with the coronavirus happening. He has basically been saying, this is why we need Medicare for all. We would have a better system right now if we had Medicare for all.
I would... It's hard to say.
Yeah,
it really is hard to say.
And as a counterpoint to that, you'll see videos or, quote tweets of people talking about how there's a overcrowding of hospitals in Italy or similar news like that and saying this is why we can never have Medicare for all because America is so much better off because we don't have this system. And it's really hard to say who is right and who is wrong in this scenario or if either of them are right at all.
The weird thing, just from a purely theoretical economic point of view on Medicare for all, is that in theory, it's that Medicare for all is inefficient, right?
Yeah.
We would devote too much resources to a problem that we don't need to devote those resources to. Mm-hmm. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if that's the argument against Medicare for all, Italy clearly isn't doing Medicare for all the way that we're supposed to be doing it in theory because they didn't have enough stuff.
Yeah. Their system, what you need to do with both America and any system, so the system that Bernie's critiquing, you need to look at it from one perspective, and you need to look at Italy's situation, for example, from a completely different one. So Italy, very few people own houses. Almost everyone owns apartments. They live in high numbers in those apartments. It's typically family and most extended families. So you'll see parents and their grandkids living in the same apartment, and then maybe an aunt and uncle and their kids thrown in there too, in a 4 or 5 bed apartment. So it's very crowded living scenarios. The culture there is very close also, and is a very contact oriented culture. So, you have the hugging and the kissing and everything like that. And it's very just like homey. And that type of culture breeds the spread of disease easier. So it's you can't say that it's the Medicare or the single payer healthcare system that's dooming Italy. If anything, it's the aging population and their culture. And the U.S. is, you can't say that it's the healthcare system that's dooming the country, because it's, there are definitely problems, just like there are problems in Italy, but it's not necessarily the case that that's what's dooming the country.
Yeah. That said, though, we just this evening, I think the United States jumped to the third highest amount of cases.
Yeah, we surpassed Iran and South Korea, I believe. So it's just Japan and Italy.
Really, that's, I think, what we're all about, surpassing
Italy,
Iran.
If I remember correctly.
So, yeah, surpassing Iran. So we're number 3. Bill de Blasio came on CNN a few minutes ago and said that and was talking statistics. Apparently, a third of those cases are in New York City. That seems pretty easy to believe. Mm-hmm. If we're just looking at it from like a practical perspective, why the heck are a third of those cases in New York City? Well, because it's the same kind of environment. Everybody's living in apartments. It might not be a contact-based society, but people are sure as hell living closer together. Yeah. And the public transportation,
you have a lot of sharing of germs on the subway. If anyone's been to the New York subway, you know that is not a clean area at all.
Yeah. So, I mean, New York City is, I've seen pictures, it kind of is a ghost town, which...
yeah, right now there are few people. There are still way more people than you see in, like, Italy right now, where the streets are basically empty. It's pretty much a ghost town. But yeah, they've been doing a good job of kind of keeping out of it.
Yeah. So it devolves into a question of our current system now is, at least in theory, and I mean that in the strongest sense of the word, in theory, based on efficiency, right? The argument against Medicare falls, we don't want to be spending too much money on all this stuff.
Yeah.
We don't want to create an inefficient market. Mm-hmm. Well, clearly it's difficult, because we might, as a percentage of the population, get out of this better than Italy did. I mean, at least I hope we do.
Yeah.
And is that then an indictment of Medicare for all? I would say no.
No, I definitely don't think so. But also, if we get out of it, if for some reason it gets worse than it is in Italy, I don't think that's an indictment for the current system.
Yeah. Even and especially if all this crazy stuff that has been thrown around recently is going to happen. Like if Trump calls in the defense, it's escaping me right now.
Yeah.
But it is the World War II era law that allows the president to basically not nationalize industries.
Basically temporarily nationalize an industry.
Yeah, he can control what is being produced and where it is being sent, which is basically control the whole business. So if that happens, and I don't know, I mean, there have been a lot of companies that are volunteering to do certain things.
Mm-hmm. A lot of companies are making medical masks and scrubs and everything else that hospitals under duress might need.
Right. And it's interesting because right now, I think of course, it's still a calm before the storm. We're going to see the storm hit in New York City first.
Yeah.
Next week, according to just this de Blasio interview that I was listening to, in the next 10 days, New York City hospitals are going to run out of supplies.
Yeah, unless people act very fast, which is a big problem.
Apparently, now, according to the same interview, apparently de Blasio had a really, really productive conversation with Trump and Pence. Mm-hmm. That's what de Blasio said.
Yeah.
I would love to trust him. I really, really would.
We've heard the same thing from Pelosi many times over, though.
Yeah. And de Blasio knows what he needs to do. So.
Yeah. So speaking of, Trump, the bigger question for the, political sided people who aren't necessarily as affected by this is, what does this mean for November 2020 and moving forward?
Correct. let's imagine a world where okay, first things first, we have to assume that the election is going to be normal. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I don't think that I think that the possibility of delaying an election has not crossed any high-ranking officials in the White House's mind. I can't say that it has, but it probably hasn't not crossed their mind.
But let's assume for the sake of this that
the election stays on.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's going to be November. We'll definitely be over this by then.
Hopefully.
So, here are the two sort of impactful, because now this is, I mean, in a good and a bad way, this is now a very simple election. This is I mean, if 2008 was a financial crisis election, 2020 is a coronavirus election.
Absolutely. That's basically every single issue among any undecided voter or semi-decided voter will almost definitely be voting over how Trump handles this crisis. And
the really annoying thing, coronavirus is a partisan issue now.
Kind of. It
literally, not only does it affect the country differently, it affects the country based just on a broad average.
Generally.
If you're a Republican, not only are you like 74% likely to say that the president is doing a good job, but you're also very likely to say that the virus is not a big deal. And that's probably true because a lot of Republicans are living in rural areas.
Yeah.
And the virus is not that impactful in rural areas.
A lot of Democrats live in urban areas where the virus is hitting just like it is in Italy. The flip side, though, is that Republican voters, while less likely to catch the disease, are older and more likely to be severely affected by the disease, whereas Democratic voters are more likely to get it and not have any adverse effects by it, it's a weird kind of split, but that's the world we're living in. But what you're seeing now is the very beginning of the seeds of polarization among the coronavirus. So obviously you have both sides arguing why you need their healthcare system, and you also see, Trump calling it the China virus.
Oh my God.
Fun. And
I won't go into the China virus thing.
Just a wee bit
so
racist
stupid.
And based on a conspiracy theory that has, no footing and all that fun stuff. But Trump's policies, what he's been doing in the past week especially, has been generally bipartisan, and it feels like received with general
because Trump hasn't been doing anything.
Non-distaste with, Rand Paul, before he got infected or confirmed to be infected, got his bill passed that pushed the tax filing deadline back to June or July.
Thank you for that, Rand Paul.
Yes, that's a great idea that I think everyone can agree is a good idea. What's his name? Steve Mnuchin is in talks with Mitt Romney and with Democrats about a temporary UBI bill, if we can call it that, of two payments of on average $1,200.
Originally, the talks were just $1,000. Now we're up to $1,200.
Yes,
I'm not complaining. I think that $1,000 probably would have been enough, but when you're talking margins here, it's always nice to be on the high side.
Yeah, the only problem is that estimates say that it would be able to be out by April 15th, which is way, way, way too late for many Americans. Many of them, because studies show, I think it's 2/3 of Americans, maybe even up to 70%, live 70%. Paycheck to paycheck. And, paycheck to paychecks every 2 weeks. And if you're waiting 6 weeks in between paychecks, that's no more money for groceries. That's no more money for healthcare.
And despite what people in the financial sector might tell you, there is a liquidity crisis. Now, what does that mean? That I'm just going to throw liquidity crisis out there. It's not like the banks. It's not like 2008. The banks have money. They do have money.
We gave it to them.
They're just not going to give it to anybody because nobody is going to do anything with that money, because how could they? There are no businesses open. Mm-hmm. So you may not have the sort of the one side of the liquidity crisis where, the bank doesn't have the money to give you, but you have the other side of the bank's not going to give you money.
Yeah.
So particularly small businesses can't get bridge loans that are going to sort of help them weather the storm, can pay their employees, or just, pay rent. Medium-sized businesses are going to fall into this too a little bit. And then large businesses and with monopolies, corporate consolidated businesses like the airline industry, they are completely screwed. So particularly those larger businesses are needing direct cash infusions of their own. Directly from the government. So we have a little bit of that 2008 pre-Tea Party flair, but I feel like everybody's a little bit more informed. But at the same time, you have it with the added drama of, ooh, there's also a disease. And it's not like, you can just go out and buy a house and that might save somebody a little bit of a headache. It's like, no, you can't sell, you can't buy.
Yeah,
We're stuck in a downward spiral.
It's not only that people will be hurting from this, but businesses will also really be hurting from this because, it's really only grocery stores and doctors' offices that are open anymore in most states across the country.
GameStop.
And also GameStop, because they are essential for life if you ask their board members.
I mean, it's kind of, I don't actually disagree,
but like
as a 20-year-old white dude.
GameStop also has online services. And I think that's where they could be, staying open is, their ship from store type stuff versus keeping the store open, as one of them. Nerds are not known for their hygiene or good standards. That's kind of a stereotype of them. So, that's not necessarily the best idea. But
Yikes.
that's a separate topic. The more important thing is, what will this mean for 2020? And
the reason we bring all this up, though, so let's get to that. So why do we bring up, this is going to be the truth for businesses, this is why people are going to struggle? Because these issues that impact people are going to code, if you will, they're going to define how people perceive the crisis after it's over. So
absolutely.
So how people see the crisis after it's over is going to have, if they're undecided, a very, very large impact on how they vote.
So if you own a small business and your small business goes under, it's very unlikely that you're going to end up voting for Trump. Whereas if you have a small business and get a loan of $3,000 so you can keep paying your employees for another few weeks and you can help pay your rent and everything like that, then you're going to be doing much better off, and you're going to be I don't know how much more likely, but at least a little bit more likely to vote for Trump, even if you don't like his personality.
That's a theory. That's going to have to be,
tested,
confirmed by polling data, but at least in it logically that makes sense.
Yes, and this election in so many different ways will be a great case study going forward, just like 2016, but in a completely different way of, it'll be studied in crisis classes, it'll be studied in management classes, it'll be studied in politics classes, just to see.
I think it'll really be studied exclusively in politics. I think it'll see the most study in those politics classes because for a lot of these industries, it's not really a matter of perception. This is just a big test of how do our systems work? Do we have a practical response?
I do think you'll see a good bunch of it in management classes though, also because how is Trump going to manage this crisis? How are they going to get out of it? How are they going to keep their perception up? Because Trump's whole game is popularity right now, and his major pride, the Dow Jones, is not doing very good at all right now.
Trump bump is gone, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, the Dow is now negative under Trump's leadership. I mean, for his fault or for not, it's negative under his leadership after 1 week of trading or two. But, there are plenty of other measures other than the stock market to see if people are doing well. That's probably one of the worst measures you can use to see if people are doing well. Outside of the 90% of the 1% of people that own 90% of the stocks. But if you're looking at how consumers are feeling and how how fast money is moving around, if that's back up before July, Trump's probably going to have a good popularity bump going forward. And the sooner that's up, the sooner that helps him.
Let's do scenarios here. Let's say, how is this good for Trump? How is this bad for Trump? Yeah. So I think that I think Trump can come out of this well if a few things happen. Number one, if the Democrats stall too long on this Senate bill, so it just failed a procedural vote tonight, a few hours ago, This is Sunday night, by the way.
Yes.
So the Senate just failed to pass a procedural vote because of Democrats.
Yeah.
Republicans couldn't ram it through, but usually they wouldn't be able to do that. Democrats caused this vote to fail. So if they stall for too long, people are going to start to turn on them. It can be also good for Trump if there is sort of favorable populist, so to speak, deals that are cut for the American people. And what do I mean by that? They actually roll the UBI out with in a relatively efficient way, and lots of people get it. And number three, if I think that how they do the business loans doesn't necessarily matter, because there are enough corporate Republicans who are probably going to be able to sway some of the more maybe Trumpian conspiracy-oriented Republicans, and those kind of Republicans are so blinded by whatever Trump does is right that they will. I have a feeling that they'll lose their Tea Party leanings, even if corporations are able to take the money that they're given by Steve Mnuchin to do stock buybacks.
Don't quote me on this, but a lot of the rumor going around is that basically what's going to happen is, for small businesses and nonprofits and the like, they're going to lend them the money that they need to keep their employees on for X amount of months, and then just forgive that loan after the crisis ends. So basically just, a handout to small businesses and nonprofits in a bit of a roundabout way, but apparently that's the easiest way to do it, the fastest way to do it. And if that's the case, that's going to really sway some moderate small business owners and nonprofit workers. Really do it, because that's job security right there for months, and that means everything in this crisis.
And then you also get the sort of publicity bump of the big press conference when you get to come out and say, we've decided to forgive the loans.
I think Trump has held more press conferences in the past month than he has the rest of his entire presidency.
Especially, ones where he was there. Anyway.
Yes, ones where he was there.
Okay, so the UBI and loan forgiveness, that's how it can go well for Trump, and Democrats stalling for too long. How can this go bad for Trump?
And we should clarify the UBI. What we mean by that is not any sort of long-term plan. It would be at about 2 or 3 payments of $1,200. So we like to call it UBI because it's kind of the predecessor to it, if you would like to see it that way. But it's kind of temporary basic income, not universal basic income. And it also is fixed to your income, so rich people will be getting less, which is, again, very weird to see from a Republican president. But, definitely among people like Alex and me, very much welcomed.
You can say that we're dreamers, but we're not the only ones.
To quote all the celebrities this week.
Fair. So, going bad for Trump. Well, if the people don't get their money, if the UBI doesn't get passed, boom, it's done.
Depends.
The fact that they talked about it, I think that that's a hard. He just takes a hard L.
If they're able to pin it on the Democrats, it's fine. And Trump has.
They're the party in power, though. I don't think they'll be able to do that.
He has a way of pinning stuff on Democrats. We'll see. We'll definitely see. It all depends on how he spins it. If he's able to spin it the best way for him, he should be fine. But either way, it's not going to help him.
Yeah, especially they have talked about this now, and it's not like Democrats have been talking about it. Mitt Romney talked about it.
Yeah.
Steve Mnuchin talked about it. I don't know if Trump or Pence have talked about it directly. Maybe they have. I feel like Trump has probably said it in a prepared statement.
Probably in a prepared statement, yeah.
It's a sad state of affairs that nobody pays attention to those anymore, but let's just assume it was in there. But it's not like this has only been a Democrat thing. Republicans have been talking about the cash payments, the UBI as well.
Yes.
So if it doesn't come after they've talked about it, boom, it's like a very, very sharp example of promises made, promise broken.
And that's really not what Trump wants at all, especially on something as big as that. Even if it just looks like a, bipartisan failure, another legislative deal or another legislative bipartisan deal gone wrong, that's not going to help him at all, because that's one of, the 1,000 other than criminal justice reform that hasn't gone through, or that has gone through. Yeah.
And so now the second part, if we're going to say the UBI could go good or bad, the loans can also go good or bad. But I think that because of who Republicans are, I think that the loans, the money to businesses is generally going to be a win-win for them, whether it's the Democrats have been calling it a slush fund. I mean, Obama had a slush fund too. It was just nobody talked about it because they were loans. So I don't know if the slush fund goes through as it is. I don't think it'll make a difference because of what I said before. The Trump Republicans that are the kind of people who would get annoyed with a mystery amount of money specifically for the corporate elites are the kind of Trump Republicans that are very, very likely to follow him blindly.
But I also don't think those are the Republicans he's trying to convince. If you remember, he has about 90% approval among Republicans consistently, minimum. Who he's trying to win over by this are the people that work for and own those small businesses and nonprofits. I shouldn't say own nonprofits, operate nonprofits, because it's kind of counterintuitive. But, the people that operate the nonprofits and own the small businesses that are, moderate and Midwestern white voters, the people that are going to be determining this election, that's who he's trying to win over. And that's who those loans really, really could be effective on.
And if they are, quote unquote, slush fund loans, those people, the Midwestern business owners, are not going to see those loans for probably a month until they are a month after. Like, let's say that bill was passed tomorrow, right? Yeah. Small business owners wouldn't see any evidence of those loans in their business dealings for at least a month.
Probably, yeah. And then you just have to hope that all those small business leaders can pay those employees until that time, or else,
and it's unclear if they'll be able to do so.
Yeah, very much so.
Small businesses are the backbone of our economy.
They are, but they're also not the backbone of our savings.
Oh, that hurt a little bit, but it's pretty true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think there's a world where the Republicans stall too long? Because, they've already passed 3 bills on this. The first one funding the CDC and other research institutions. The second one sending out...
Yeah.
Here, I'll finish. So the second one is sending basically money to... I think it's allocating money for manufacturing protective gear. Mm-hmm. And now this third one is a combo of the Recovery Act. So... Is there any, as far as the third one goes, is there any way that, oh my God, I lost my train of thought.
So I think that this is one of the earliest cases of Republican action during economic downturn, especially if you look at past recessions and depressions. They've been typically pretty, not slow to act, but reluctant to act. And now what you're seeing already is legislation being at least debated, but also passed that is directly helping the people.
That's what I was thinking of.
That is going to be swaying those average Jims from Oakmont, PA that need to vote, and that Trump needs to vote for him because, Trump lost in Pennsylvania in the gubernatorial race. He lost in Michigan. He lost in Wisconsin. That's not a good sign for him, and he needs those Jims votes.
Well, let's also clarify. Trump won the presidential race in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
But Tom Wolf, a Democrat, was still elected governor, if I'm not mistaken.
In 2018, alongside the Democrat.
In 2018, right.
Alongside the Democrat in Michigan and the Democrat in Wisconsin.
Yeah. So as far as those being canaries in the coal mine, I think it's a fair assumption to make that that's definitely concerning development for Trump and the Republican Party.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's weird. Pennsylvania, especially the middle of Pennsylvania, is kind of being affected. We'll see how impacted Pennsylvania is because of its proximity to New York State.
Yeah, so far, eastern Pennsylvania has been very, very affected, but the western PA, where a lot of those undecided voters are, hasn't.
Yeah, politicians, let's not really care about Eastern PA.
Yeah, generally Eastern PA is blue, Central PA is red, and Western PA is purple, and that's where Pennsylvania is the swing state, is some Philly suburbs, but mostly those Pittsburgh suburbs.
Yeah, and let's be honest, Philly is basically a New York suburb, at least northeastern Pennsylvania is.
Yeah, in a sense,
if New York City is in a quarantine, then it makes a lot of sense as to why the rest of the East Coast is having problems. But again, Pittsburgh is not terribly connected to those areas. It is by some of us, but it's difficult. There's not a ton of human contact between those 2 points.
Yeah,
we've seen the disease creeping through Ohio via Chicago, and
it's kind of been being sandwiched. But yeah.
So is it a matter? So it's difficult to say whether central Pennsylvania will really have it or not. I know it's in Lancaster already. And I know it's creeping toward eastern Ohio. So once it hits eastern Ohio,
it's in Cuyahoga County already. It's in
Cuyahoga County already. So if it starts to, really keep going out of Cleveland and get toward a little bit further southeast, then I think that's going to be sort of the tipping point as to when people start to take it seriously. But I was out shopping today at Target. I had to pick up some supplies, and I mean, Target employees were wearing gloves, but nobody else was. I was the only one. I was the only person out wearing a mask, and I was getting looks.
It's kind of that American, individualism that is hurting us, if anything, not our healthcare system, because it's not affecting me. I'm fine. I'm young.
Bringing up rugged individualism during a recession is not exactly a positive sign.
No, but it's a large reason of why it's been spreading across the U.S. so much is because young people are like, oh, well, it won't affect me that badly, so I can, take my spring break to Florida still, and I'll be fine.
Oh, my God. I wish I was back in Florida. Andrew Cuomo had his daughter on to try and yell at Gen Zs and millennials to not go on spring break, but I guess none of us listened.
No, really, we didn't.
Yeah. But I think that's really all there is to say.
It's all going to come down to how.
Apologies for not talking about. Apologies for hyping up this episode. This past Friday.
Yes.
But the studio decided that it was also going to go home, so nothing worked. Which is why we're going to be recording like this, and we will be for the foreseeable future.
Yes, unless we somehow get some fancy audio stuff or whatever. This is going to be our setup. So thank you for sticking with us. The time right now is 10:05 p.m. on Sunday night, March 22nd, and we're just about to wrap it up for this evening.
Our intro and outro music is by Paul Abrams and Rock Solid Panda. It's also produced by Elise Duda.
You can find a recording of this podcast on our YouTube channel, Catch 52, as well as our Spotify, our iTunes, podcasting apps, anything that you use to listen to your favorite podcast, you'll find us there. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter to stay updated on any of our air times, our episode topics, and our upcoming guests.
We will still be having those guests. We're trying. But despite that, we are still welcome and very, very open to your comments, any feedback, any suggestions. Don't stay with us on WDSR because we're not there anymore.
And have a good rest of your week and stay safe in your homes.